and welcome to Inside Outlook. I'm Jeff Havers, Superintendent of Pemberton Township Schools. As we do every year in the spring, today we are going to share a 2024-2025 budget with you. Our goal is to give you a better understanding of the many factors that determine funding in our school district and demonstrate how that money is allocated. With me today is Business Administrator Pat Yacovelli, who will be sharing his budget presentation with us. Welcome, Mr. Yacovelli.
Good morning, Mr. Havers. I'm very pleased to be here today and ask that you follow my presentation on the 2024-2025 school district budget.
Excellent. So it'll be right on the screen for our viewers. Thank you, Mr. Yacovelli.
So good morning. I'm here to present the preliminary 2024-2025 school district budget. Again, my name is Pat Yacovelli, and I'm the business administrator. First, we're going to review some important dates in the budget calendar. On February 29th, state aid figures were released to all school districts in New Jersey. March 20th, the preliminary budget was required to be submitted to the Department of Education. And on April 25th, we have our planned public hearing for approval of the final 2024-2025 school district budget. We're going to jump into our 2024-25 revenues. And with that, we'll be discussing an update on S2 legislation and reduction of state aid, the tax levy, the district's reserve accounts, federal funds that are included in the budget. Lastly, we'll summarize our revenues. So S2 was Senate Bill number 2, approved by the Governor Murphy in 2018. It's also known as Chapter 67. It impacts school districts that receive adjustment aid, spend above their adequacy, and are below the local fair share. The legislation included language that adjustment aid will be reduced over 7 years by the percentage of the state aid differential. For the 2024-25 year, we're in year 7 of that 7-year reduction. So before we received our state aid notice for this year, Pemberton Township School District has lost $16.6 million in state funding. Very huge and dramatic number. This is the phase-in percentage under S2 legislation. And again, for the 2024-25 year, we will be at 100% of the phase-in for reductions. So what does that look like for both Pemberton Township and Pemberton Borough? When those state aid notices were received, Mr. Havers and I reviewed them, and we looked at the state aid differential, which is the calculated aid versus the actual aid. And for Pemberton Township, it was a negative number, so we were not over for the 24-25 year. The district received an additional $551,576 in total state aid. Our adequacy spending, we were under adequacy, which is the calculated spending versus actual spending, by an amount of $7,451,150. When we analyzed Pemberton Borough, their state aid differential was a positive number, $102,046. So again, we're in year 7, which is 100% of the reduction. So Pemberton Borough saw a reduction of state aid in that same amount. Next, we're going to talk about the tax levy and the local fair share, which is how much a district can afford to contribute toward the adequacy budget. It compares equalized value and aggregate income, and the factors change from year to year. The next two snapshots here are taken directly from our state aid notices. The upper portion is the township, and the lower portion is the borough. And again, the local share calculation takes into account equalized value and district income. For the township, the local fair share calculated to $27,241,870. For the borough, their local fair share calculated to $1,704,924. We want to add those two numbers together to get a total local fair share of $28,946,794. When we compare our tax levy to the local fair share, we see that we are in year 7 of S2. The tax levy of $24,062,381, which represents a 9% increase in the tax levy, but we are still well below local fair share by $4,884,413. What does this mean for the local taxpayer? For the township, on an average assessed property of $165,239, which that number is obtained by the tax assessor's office, it represents an increase of $112 for the year and roughly $9.34 per month. For the borough, on an average assessed property of $186,258, we'll see an increase of $169 for the year and roughly $14.09 per month. Next, we're going to talk about our reserve accounts that the district is using in the budget. The first is our impact aid reserve. We know that we are a military-connected district and we receive federal and state impact aid funding. So we're withdrawing from the impact aid reserve $216,091 to be used in the district's 24-25 budget. Next, the district is also withdrawing from its capital reserve $600,000 for high school courtyard improvements or high school roof repairs. We also received notification in January from the Schools Development Authority. The district would be receiving $1 million in emergent and capital needs funds, which will also be used for roof repairs at the high school. Federal funds, we are in the last phase of ESSER 3 funding. That was the third round of federal stimulus funds, and that expires September 30th of 2024. All funds must be spent by that date, and there is no carryover that is allowed or permitted. The ESSER 3 funds includes funding for summer school and enrichment. 2024 will be the last summer. After school tutoring, so going forward, we'll utilize any available federal Title I funding to maintain this. I'm also happy to report that aides in the kindergarten classrooms are budgeted in the local district budget. And we are also including in the local district budget 2 dean of students. So this is our revenue summary. The first slide here is our our local revenues, which consist of our fund balance, our withdrawal from our reserves, our local tax levy, and other miscellaneous funds, which essentially is any revenues that don't fit into those first 3 categories. We see that the fund balance has increased by $2,468,000, and that's primarily driven by additional maintenance of equity funds, our withdrawal from our reserves of $816,000, our local tax levy of $24,062,000, and our miscellaneous revenues of $592,000. So our local revenues total $34,935,000. The next slide is our state and federal aid, starting with our state aid funds, which show an increase of $551,000. Our adjustment aid stayed the same. Semi-revenue, which is Special Education Medicaid Initiative, that's federal funds that are received for services to special education population. And lastly is our federal impact aid, which we are anticipating a decrease. So our state and federal aid totals $70,536,828. The next slide is our special revenue funds, which consist of our preschool education aid. We know that the governor is pushing for expansion of preschool program for all public school districts. We saw an increase of $586,704. Transfers to the preschool program, this amount of $859,992 represents the special education portion of our preschool program. Our federal titles grants, which are Titles 1, 2, 3, and 4. The county office recommends that districts budget 85% of their current year revenue. We have the IDEA program, which is the Individuals with Disability Education Act, We're anticipating flat funding there. And our other federal grants, which consist of the Perkins Vocational Grant and the 21st Century Communities Grant. So our special revenue fund totals $12,355,159. Taking the totals from those three slides, from the local, the state and federal, and special revenue, we have a total revenue budget of $117,827,352. So in order to present a balanced budget where our revenues equal our appropriations, there are reductions in the 2024-25 budget. They come by way of salaries and benefits, totaling $1,180,713. Through attrition, we have a decrease of 10 full-time equivalents, FTEs. The budget is including a floating nurse position, so our net reductions of full-time equivalent staff is 9. The remaining savings are achieved through what we call breakage. That's defined as the difference in salary of budgeted staff versus the higher salary staff they replaced who retired or resigned. The board action that was taken at the March meeting was to recommend the board approve the 2024-2025 preliminary budget in the amount of $117,827,352 with a proposed total tax levy of $24,062,381 for submission to the Executive County Superintendent. And that preliminary budget was submitted on March 19th. Our next steps from here. Now that the county office has our budget, it's reviewing our budget along with all the other school districts in Burlington County, and they will reply with any comments or recommendations, suggestions. We'll be discussing any modifications to the budget with the Finance Committee on April 15th. And again, our public hearing on the final budget is scheduled for April 25th, and that will include any modifications to the budget based on the County Office of Education's review.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yacovelli. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Havers.
We were very fortunate to receive additional funding this year, and I am grateful to the legislators who heard our call for action. Last year, when I asked our learning community to reach out to our representatives to advocate for fair funding, many of you emailed and called them, and I believe your actions made a difference. I'm now asking you to communicate your appreciation for their support. And please email Senator Latham Tiver, Assemblywoman Andrea Katz, and Assemblyman Michael Torrisi Jr. to thank them for the advocacy on our behalf. A few reminders before I go. The next Board of Education work session will take place Thursday, April 18th at 6:30 p.m. in the Pemberton Township High School Auditorium. The next action meeting will take place Thursday, April 25th at 6:30 p.m., also in the Pemberton Township High School Auditorium. This meeting will feature Mr. Yacovelli's budget presentation to the Board of Education. That's our show for today, and I look forward to seeing you next time on Inside Outlook.